I call the members to order, and the first item on our agenda this week is questions to the First Minister, and the first question is from Di Lloyd.
Thank you, Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement on the development of tidal energy in South Wales West?
Thank you very much, Llywydd. We continue to work with partners across Wales, particularly in South Wales West, to develop a strong and positive future for the marine energy industry, whilst preserving our rich marine biodiversity. Tidal energy remains an area in which Wales could lead the world.
Thank you very much for that response. And as you know, in a meeting of the Scrutiny of the First Minister Committee recently, I raised my concern that the first test centre anywhere in the world in developing materials for tidal energy were now being built in Scotland. There is a risk that we in Wales are losing momentum, therefore, in terms of putting ourselves in the vanguard in this field. The Swansea Bay Tidal Lagoon is an opportunity for Wales to become a global leader, but with the London government having turned its back on Wales once again, the Welsh government, in my view, needs to show clear leadership on this issue. Now, with the world of the work of the Task and Finish group of the Swansea Bay team coming to an end, it was suggested that something may emerge from that which would seek support from the Welsh government. Now, can you expand on any recent discussions on this point, and to what extent is the Welsh Government considering co-production in this regard?
Well, may I thank Di Lloyd for that question. I remember the question that he posed at the Scrutiny Committee. And of course, we continue to work with the City Council's task force, and we look forward to receiving its report when it's ready. And as has been true over the years, Welsh Government is ready to participate in the project and to contribute to the capital costs of building the Swansea Bay Tidal Lagoon. The problem, of course, Llywydd, is with the cost of the electricity. And in that field, that is the responsibility of the United Kingdom government to announce a scheme that can support the sector with the electricity costs. And it is the United Kingdom government that commissioned that report initially. And so they must be accountable for not implementing the clear recommendations of their own report.
First Minister, I recently chaired a policy forum at which Tidal Lagoon Power, they were there, and they spoke about the work that they're doing to encourage businesses to buy energy from them in order to provide a future for the Lagoon project. Welsh Government's National Procurement Service states it collaborates with public organisations to use collective buying power to get a good deal for Wales, whether it's supply teachers, fuel, computers or sandwiches. Now, we know that the strike price is a question that has threatened this project. So how can the work done on the National Procurement Service here on collective buying help make the case to organisations that it could be good value to buy energy from a tidal energy source like the Swansea Bay Tidal Lagoon?
Well, Llywydd, I understand the point that Susie Davis is making, and I've heard arguments made by those involved in the scheme in Swansea that the way to deal with the failure of the UK government to have a contract for difference approach to the electricity that will be produced by any lagoon is to spread the cost of that amongst a large number of public and private sector buyers of that electricity. And I understand the case that they are making. But surely the real answer is that the UK government should recognise that this was always to be a demonstration project, that it is inevitable in nascent technologies that the price of electricity produced will be higher than it otherwise would be in the marketplace. And just as previous governments were willing to do in the fields of solar and wind, that they must find a tariff for marine energy, not simply tidal lagoon technology, but marine energy that allows those new technologies to be attempted and, as we would see it, to thrive here in Wales. That's the right way to do it, spreading the cost amongst public and private sector buyers here in Wales will only go so far and will in the end result in Welsh citizens having to subsidise a cost that always ought to have been the responsibility of the UK government.
David Rees.
First Minister, Dai pointed out that the energy proposals of the Tidal Lagoon actually could create a new sector of industry across the South Wales region, and clearly also support other industries there, including the steel plant in Port Talbot. Following last Friday's announcement of the joint venture collapse that is likely to happen between Tata and ThyssenKrupp, this is now a possibility of actually where we can see steel being used from the Port Talbot plant into a project which will give benefits not just to the region but to the whole of Wales through energy. Would you therefore go back to the UK government with a message that this is a possibility of how the UK government can help the steel industry as well as the Tidal Lagoon and Tidal Energy?
Well, I want to thank the member for making that important point and for taking the opportunity, which I know he does whenever he has that opportunity, to speak up for the steel industry across Wales and in his own constituency. The case for the Tidal Bay Lagoon was never in the relatively small number of jobs that were directly to be involved in the project. That's the point that the Secretary of State for Wales tried to make when trying to excuse the UK government's decision not to go ahead with the scheme. The jobs were always to be created in those supply chains and those other manufacturing possibilities that go with a new industry that can be born here in Wales. And of course there would be potential for Welsh-produced steel to be used in that construction. And I'm very happy to give the member an undertaking that we will write again to the UK government, making the case that he's just put to me in this new context.
Question 2, McAntonev.
Question 2, McAntonev.
First Minister make a statement on the support that is available to haemophiliacs and their families in Wales.
Thank the member for that question. Services available to people in Wales with haemophilia include specialist physiotherapy, psychology, social services and access to latest treatments. In addition, the Welsh Infected Blood Support Scheme provides a package of financial and other measures for people affected by infected blood.
First Minister, you will recognise, as most of us here do, that the contaminated blood scandal is one of the great and terrible scandals that's occurred, admittedly well before devolution, but one where there is a legacy with us to this day. You'll also be pleased to, I'm sure, to welcome the commencement at long last of the contaminated blood inquiry, which has started to take place. And I'm sure you will also welcome the actual work that Julie Morgan has done with Haemophilia Wales and with the families and the victims throughout Wales, and the work she's done with the cross-party group. But First Minister, as the inquiry started, the UK government announced a financial package of support, until it turned out that that financial package only applies to England, that it appears that Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland are an afterthought and are not included within it, that there is no new money, no new funding, no new consequential. And this, First Minister, must be one of the most cruel and reckless activities by the UK government, raising expectations while not providing any financial support. First Minister, will you urge the UK government, firstly, to ensure that there is new money, proper money, to find these people who deserve it, there is proper provision for the widows, and could you inform this chamber what discussions, what contacts you have had from the UK government, because they are certainly writing in correspondence that there are negotiations about to start. And will you also arrange to meet with the cross-party group, or members of your government to meet with the cross-party group, so that they can be involved in any forward planning, any decision-making process, but also for an explanation as to where we are with this inquiry and with the issue of support for victims?
Well, I thank the member for those very important questions. Let me begin by agreeing with him that, of course, we welcome the establishment of the inquiry chaired by Sir Brian Langstaff. I'm pleased to be able to report to the Chamber that the Welsh Government has secured core participant status in the inquiry, which gives us extra rights of access to the inquiry. And the inquiry, I understand, intends to come to Wales on the 23rd of July, and we'll spend 4 days here taking evidence directly from those affected and those infected in the contaminated blood scandal. And we will do whatever we can as a Welsh Government to assist people to make sure that they can put their case to the inquiry. But to go to the specific point the member raised, on the 21st of January this year, a meeting was held, chaired by the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, at which it was agreed that there was a need for a UK-wide approach with parity for all those affected. And that meeting was attended by Scotland, by Wales, and by UK ministers. And we came away from that meeting having signed up to that proposition and made efforts to secure further meetings beyond the 21st of January. However, on the 30th of April, the first day of the infected blood inquiry, the UK government made a unilateral announcement of additional funding for English patients only. There was no consultation, there was no prior ministerial notice, and it was a breach of the agreement that had been reached on the 21st of January. We've since had a letter from a junior minister at the Department of Health. It takes your breath away, really, when she says to us, I believe, she says, that we could all benefit from greater dialogue and cooperation on these matters. It beggars belief, really, that such a letter could be sent to us when they had done exactly the opposite. The campaigners, the charities and the campaign groups who had been part of the meeting on the 21st of January have since written to the Prime Minister saying that their understanding was that those discussions were for the whole of the United Kingdom. We assumed, they said, that the decision involved devolved administrations and have learned with a mixture of disappointment, anger and frustration that that has turned out not to be the case. Now, Llywydd, during the first decade of devolution, the government at the UK level observed scrupulously the agreement that anything that had happened prior to devolution was a cost on the UK government. Things that have happened since devolution, of course, are a cost on us here. The awful scandal in contaminated blood happened many, many years before devolution, and the devolution rules seem to me unambiguously to require that if money is provided by the UK government for patients in England, then the same help must be available to patients throughout the United Kingdom, and we will continue to make that case as vigorously as we can with UK ministers.
Janet Finch-Saunders.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, as part of the work, the inquiry work taking place here in Wales, could you provide some clarity perhaps as to when pharmaceutical professionals in Wales could be expected to administer the trialled recombinant laboratory-made factor products such as FC fusion, PE dilation and albumin fusion, and also advise, sort of what work this government is doing with patients here in Wales to, in terms of communication as to how these drugs might actually make a big difference to their lives going forward.
Well, so on the 6th of March, my colleague Vaughan Gethin provided a written statement to the Assembly setting out a fair and comprehensive package of additional support for families and individuals here in Wales. We believe that that went some way to meeting the concerns of those families. I'm happy to write to the member on the specific question of when pharmaceutical professionals will be able to administer new forms of drug therapy. But we have been talking in this question about something more fundamental than that. We've been talking about financial support that people who have been infected by a failure on the part of the National Health Service nearly 40 years ago, that will allow them to live decent lives at this point in their life cycle. And while there are other things that we want to do, that fundamental issue deserves to be tackled right across this chamber.
Questions now from the party leaders. Plaid Cymru leader Adam Price. Thank you, Llywydd.
A month ago, you told the BBC that in the event of a crash-out Brexit, there would be food products that would not be available to the public in supermarkets. You said you didn't believe that this would lead to food shortages to individuals, but the economic impact would be devastating to the food sector, particularly to businesses relying on fresh produce. Can you confirm that every frozen and chilled storage warehouse in Wales is already full to capacity, even with the current Brexit delay?
Well, the member makes an important point, Llywydd. I repeat what I said a while ago, that as far as the shops are concerned, people will not have the range and the choice of products that they have come to enjoy during our membership of the European Union if we leave the European Union without a deal. And those in Wales who rely on producing food that is exported to the European Union will equally find their businesses put at risk if they suddenly face new barriers, not of tariffs but of non-tariff variety, that will mean that there will be a very significant threat to large parts of Welsh food producers. I don't want to give the member a definitive answer without being certain that I have it properly in front of me, but my understanding is probably close to what he was suggesting, that the food sector is already using whatever capacity it has to prepare against the day when we leave the European Union without a deal.
Well, I can confirm that the cold storage sector in Wales is full to capacity, has been, I believe, for some months. And First Minister, you should be aware of this yourself, because your own government, prompted by concerns within the sector, commissioned a study before Christmas into cold storage capacity in Wales, which was completed in January. Now, why have you refused to publish that study? And given the understandable public concern, will you commit to doing so now? Now, in a response to a written question from me asking what representations you had received as government about a potential lack of capacity for cold food storage facilities in Wales, the Minister for Environment, Energy and Rural Affairs rather pointedly replied that you had only received a representation from one business within the sector. Can you confirm, First Minister, that there are only 2 companies in the sector in Wales, and the one you received representation from, Wildwater Group, operates 2 of the 3 cold storage facilities for food in Wales? Can you confirm specifically that they have asked you to urgently invest in the development of a new storage facility because of the pressure Brexit has already put on the food sector and supply chain in Wales? You've done precisely this for medical supplies. Given the lack of warehouse capacity in that area, why not do the same for food, given the devastating impact you yourself claim the pressure on supply chains Brexit will cause?
Well, so just to say that I'm not aware of any request that has come directly to me to release a report. I'm very happy to look to see the status of that report and if it was intended for wider circulation. My colleague Leslie Griffiths has met the Retail Consortium this morning and received assurances from them about the steps that they are taking in relation to making sure that there are supplies of food available here in Wales. The member is, of course, right to say that in the field of medical supplies, we have found storage space to ensure that there is continuity of supply. But for the government, we always have to balance spending money, which is in short supply, on things that we are certain we will need in relation, should we find ourselves leaving the European Union without a deal, against those many other calls on our EU Transition Fund, which is about preparing Welsh businesses and Welsh public services for the long-term future the other side of Brexit. I can assure the member that we keep all possibilities under regular review, and if we were convinced that it was necessary to secure further storage facilities for the purposes that he's outlined, then we would give that absolutely serious consideration. We've not been convinced of the case so far, But that doesn't mean to say that we wouldn't continue to consider it if further and better information became available.
Well, can I say to the First Minister, I asked the Minister that is responsible to publish this study. You, as First Minister, are responsible for the government as a whole. But I'm asking you again now, will you publish that study? Because I think the public have a right to know. Now, I can also tell you, First Minister, I'm in a possession of a number of letters from companies within the food sector, all claiming that the failure to invest in cold storage facilities will have serious adverse consequences now. The managing director of one leading Welsh food company expresses, and I quote, their concern with regard to a serious shortage of both chilled and frozen storage facilities within Wales. The supply chain director of another says it is imperative that we have more cold storage options in the local area to be able to continue to compete. KEPAC, which employs 700 people at the St Merrin meat plant in Merthyr, says this. If there is no increase in storage capacity in Wales, we may have to consider transferring some production from Merthyr to a site in Cornwall, which could have a negative impact on employee numbers in Merthyr. And furthermore, the National Sheep Association has said that without long-term cold storage facilities for lamb, the effects of a no-deal Brexit could be catastrophic. So can I ask you, First Minister, why, given you yourself have said that a no-deal Brexit could have a devastating impact on the food sector, given that hundreds of jobs are at stake now, the future of Welsh farming is at risk, security of food supply in Wales may itself be jeopardised, why on earth won't the Welsh Government invest the 3 to 4 million it's estimated that's needed to plug the gap in cold chain supply? And why are you putting your faith in DEFRA and companies over the border, rather than coming up with a Welsh solution to a Welsh problem that you have exacerbated through the usual dose of complacency, denial and inaction?
Well, it's hard to know, Llywydd, where to begin, where you have to try and pick the bones of a sensible question out of the normal hyperbole that the leader of Plaid Cymru cannot deny himself. So there was a sensible question in the middle of everything that he wrapped it up in, and here is a sensible answer for him. I've said to him already that I'm happy to review the report to see if it was intended for publication, and if it is, then I'm very happy to think of doing that. As far as cold storage is concerned, it is one of a whole range of things that we discuss with the industry and which the industry says they would need in order to be able to survive the catastrophic impact of a no-deal Brexit. If this is the top priority for the industry in the way that the member attempts to suggest, then I'd be happy to hear it directly from the industry. And if that's what they say to us, then we will, of course, discuss that with them as part of the way that we go about the sober business of government, which is to work alongside those people in Wales who would be affected by a no-deal Brexit, to hear from them about where they think that investment that we can make alongside them would best be put to use. And if cold storage turns out from them, rather than from him, to be their top priority, then we will certainly work with them on it.
Leader of the Opposition, Paul Davies.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, can you tell us how well your government carries out due diligence in relation to supporting businesses?
Well, Llywydd, the Welsh Government supports hundreds of businesses across Wales every day. We carry out due diligence, of course, on applications for funds that come to us, and we continue to remain in close contact with those companies during the period that we offer support to them. Does that mean that nothing ever goes wrong? Well, of course, it doesn't.
Well, let me tell you how your government undertakes due diligence. Since 2010, the Welsh Government has wasted millions and millions of pounds on bad loans and poor business decisions. Canolfan Cywaen received £3.4 million, and what happened? It closed. Mainport Engineering received £650,000 and went into administration. First Minister, I'd like to look closer at one company in particular, KUKD.com or Cooked.com. Now, the investigation into the awarding of a £1 million grant to Cooked.com from the Welsh Government was announced in September 2016. Yet almost 3 years later, we are still waiting for the report to be published into this issue. And this isn't the first time we've questioned your government's accountability and for being less transparent with us, First Minister. A long line of poorly managed projects have fallen far short of expectations and have dented the confidence of taxpayers. Let's not forget the further misjudgments by the Welsh Government, Pinewood Studios, the Circuit of Wales project, the underselling of land connected with the Regeneration Investment Fund for Wales, risky business investment in Cancoat, and irresponsible selling of Welsh timber by Natural Resources Wales. Now, given you claim that you undertake due diligence as a government, and in the interests of transparency, will you now commit today into publishing the report into Cooked.com as soon as possible, so that we in this chamber can properly scrutinise the actions of your government?
Well, Llywydd, unlike the member and presumably his party, we on these benches believe in investing in businesses here in Wales. And I certainly don't apologise for a single moment for the fact that successive Welsh governments have seen it as their duty to assist Welsh firms, to help them to grow, to create work here in Wales. And if you're not going to do that on an entirely risk-averse basis, where you're never willing to take a chance on a company that might turn out to be a really important part of our economic future here in Wales, then of course you can eliminate every possibility of something going wrong by never doing anything. And if that's the policy of his party, he should tell us here. If he doesn't believe that we should ever be prepared to invest in a business that may in the end not turn out to do everything that both it says to us, our expert panels who review every single one of these cases, and the decisions that ministers make, then people in the future will know that were his party ever to find itself in a position to make decisions here in Wales, then they wouldn't be a government prepared to do those things that allow businesses here in Wales to prosper. The member said to me that there was a lack of transparency and then proceeded to reel off a list of things which he could only possibly know as a result of information that the Welsh Government itself had placed in the public domain. My colleague Ken Skate says that he has no difficulty in publishing the report to which the member referred. So there will be another report that he will be able to read, and that will be we look forward to his views on transparency when another piece of information that is only available because this government is prepared to make it available falls into his hands.
Well, this is about transparency and accountability, First Minister. We have waited 3 years for this report. Why on earth hasn't this report been published until now? So I take it from the answer you've just given me that you will be publishing this report in due course, but that wasn't clear from your answer. Now, there are still serious questions about the relationship between the Welsh Labour Party, former Welsh Government ministers and Cooked.com. Now, in an article by Wales Online published on the 4th of November 2015, the then Economy Minister wrote that, and I quote, "Welsh Government support for this project has ensured another business founded by Mr Hussein will be headquartered in Wales," unquote. However, on the 17th of November 2015, Welsh Government officials met with Cooked.com to discuss their ongoing business difficulties and falling job creation. Then, 10 days after this meeting, Cooked.com were a principal sponsor of a Welsh Labour gala dinner at which senior management of Cooked.com and senior government ministers were present. I put it to you, First Minister, transparency and accountability and openness should be at the heart of politics and decision-making in Wales. Given that the report into Cooked.com has not yet been published, but I welcome the fact that I think you've said from your answer perhaps you will be publishing it, can you confirm that the investigation into this company will be looking at whether or not due diligence was thoroughly undertaken, and what will you and your government be learning so that taxpayers' money is spent wisely in the future?
I said in my last answer, Llywydd, that once the report is cleared for publication, it will be published and the member will be able to read it and see everything that is covered in it. I sat in a meeting of the UK Cabinet in which the £30 million that has had to be paid to Eurotunnel in compensation for decisions that his party has made in Westminster, in addition to the contracts which have now been cancelled by his government, £80 million. £80 million thrown away on that one issue. I don't need to listen to holier-than-thou speeches from the leader of the opposition, because if I want to look for where money is thrown away by public authorities, I need look no further than his party and its handling of that one single matter. There is a record number, Llywydd, of businesses now headquartered in Wales, and that wouldn't be the case if it were not for the policies that this government pursues of assisting Welsh businesses in investing in them where there is a strong case for doing so, and where those investments don't turn out to deliver what we had all hoped and had been advised was most likely to be received from them, then of course we are committed to learning the lessons from those experiences, and that's why the member was able to identify those instances that he started talking about this afternoon.
Group UKIP, Gareth Bennett.
Leader of the UKIP group, Gareth Bennett.
Group?
Gareth Bennett, you continue and ignore the rest of the chamber.
First Minister, sometimes I return to subjects here in the chamber that I have inquired about in the past, because it appears that nothing is happening. We seem to have reached this stage with Cardiff Central Railway Station. This is a major transport hub, of course, not just for people in Cardiff, but for people throughout Wales. And users will know that there is a lack of room at the station, particularly when there are major events in Cardiff, when people tend to get crammed together in the station like tin sardines. The Welsh public have been promised an upgrade of the central train station for some time. When do you think we are likely to get it?
Llywydd, the member is right to point to the fact that Cardiff Railway Station is a very busy transport location. 40% of all rail journeys in Wales begin or end at Cardiff Station. And that gives you an idea of just how important it is to people in Cardiff, but also across the whole of Wales. Now, investment in Cardiff Station is a matter not for the Welsh Government, but for the UK Government. We've referred already this afternoon to Mr Grayling and his outstanding success as a minister. And on the long list of things that he has failed to attend to is the case for upgrading Cardiff Central Railway Station. Now, we have made the case time and again to him to persuade the UK Government to give Wales a fair share of the investment in the railways that we would get if you simply gave us the share of that our railway network represents of the UK network as a whole. We get nothing like a fair share. We don't have the voice that we need in London speaking up for Wales to guarantee that we would get it. And so we have to work even harder to persuade the Transport Minister in the UK Government not to add this to his lengthy list of failings.
Thank you for your engagement with the question, and thank you for your engagement with many of the questions that I've asked you. Now, unfortunately, I'm not here to scrutinise Chris Grayling and the UK Government. I'm here to scrutinise you and your government. Now, you have made this case before of the lack of investment, which I appreciate the point that you're making. Unfortunately, it doesn't help users of the railway station who are still waiting for some kind of development work to begin. Now, a wider reflection on how your Welsh Government operates might take in the fact that every week you or your fellow ministers tell us they are in some kind of funding dispute with the UK Government. We had the absurdity recently of Welsh residents not being let in for treatment at a hospital just across the border in Chester because of this. The whole point of having a Welsh Government here at the Assembly is supposed to be that things work better for the people of Wales. To the neutral observer, it might appear that all that happens in reality is that you and your ministers run an operation which does not benefit the people of Wales at all, because all that you do is waste time blaming your lack of action on funding decisions taken at Westminster and Whitehall. First Minister, don't the people of Wales deserve something a bit better from you?
Well, Llywydd, I don't see how the member makes any claim at all to be what he refers to as a neutral observer. I hope that his remarks on Cardiff railway station are an indication that he will join us in calling for the devolution of those responsibilities so that we could discharge them directly here in Wales. I'm not sure if that is his party's policy, but if it were, I'd be very glad to know it. And where we are able to act, as in the bus station alongside the railway station in Cardiff, then it is the Welsh Government that has acted to ensure that the funding is available and the plan is in place and the bus station will be developed in a way that, provided we get the investment from the UK Government, that will turn into the transport hub that we have always wanted to see, with an interchange between different forms of public transport right here in the centre of our city. As far as the point that he ended with about the Countess of Chester, let's be clear. That was a decision of the Countess of Chester, a unilateral decision by that provider, which we have now had to spend weeks unravelling and putting back together again, the plan that they had shoved off the wall. Now, you will have seen the statement that the Health Minister has put out, explaining how, by taking the actions we have taken, we now have an agreement through the Department of Health that will make sure that the Countess of Chester goes on treating Welsh patients. But the decision not to treat Welsh patients was unilaterally, and as I would say, irresponsibly, made by them, and certainly not by us.
Tynwyd cwestiwn.
Question 3 is withdrawn. Question 4, Mandy Jones.
Diolch, Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement on what the Welsh Government intends to do to encourage more engagement in local democracy?
Thank the member for that question. The Local Government and Elections Bill will include measures to encourage engagement with local democracy in Wales by extending the franchise, promoting transparency, diversity and wider engagement.
Thank you for that answer. First Minister, we are currently celebrating 20 years of this institution with a clarion call for more Assembly members. I see that Scotland, with its population of nearly 5.5 million, has less councillors than Wales, with our population of just over 3 million. In my view, we are overrepresented in Wales. First Minister, how can you square the call for more AMs with the tax-paying public when literally nothing...
Ignore noises off and just carry on with your question.
I do come to the committee. First Minister, how can you square the call for more AMs with the tax-paying public when literally nothing is being done to reduce the number of councillors and local authorities?
Well, I don't think the basic premise of that supplementary question is true, because, in fact, the number of councillors in Wales has gone down as a result of changes brought about by the independent organisation that reviews these matters on our behalf. But I don't accept myself the basic premise of what the member said. I don't think Wales is over-represented. In fact, there are many studies that demonstrate that compared to other and very successful parts of Europe, we have less of a representative democracy here in Wales. And it's my view, it isn't shared by all members, I understand, that 20 years into devolution, the responsibilities that this body now discharges on behalf of people in Wales mean that going on trying to do that successfully with 60 members, the number we started with when the responsibilities, the range and depth of responsibilities was so different that it no longer measures up to the responsibilities that are carried out on behalf of people here in Wales, and that the case made in the McAllister review for an increase in Assembly members was well made and doesn't depend, I believe, on reducing other forms of representation in Wales in order to achieve that.
Mark Isherwood.
Yeah, Welsh Government has proved averse to implementing the Localism Act 2011's community rights agenda, which would help community engagement. In 2012, the Welsh Government rejected the Wales Council for Voluntary Action's Community's First A Way Forward report, which found that community involvement in co-designing and co-delivering local services should be central to any successor tackling poverty programme. And although the wellbeing objectives in the 2015 Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, Wales includes people contributing to their community, being informed, included and listened to, too often this hasn't happened either because people in power don't want to share it or because of a failure to understand that delivering services this way will create more efficient and effective services. So what action do you and your government propose to encourage more engagement in local democracy by turning the ambition in the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act in these areas into understanding and delivery?
Well, Llywydd, I am completely committed to the notion that public services in Wales should be co-designed and co-delivered with those people who use them alongside people who provide them. And the member makes a fair point that at the heart of these things often are power relationships, and that sometimes we have to work hard to persuade professional workers that they can share some of the power and the authority that they have at their disposal with people who use those services, and that doesn't represent a threat to them and is very, very likely to lead to better outcomes for the people who they are there to serve. I don't think that that requires specific pieces of legislation to bring it about, because I think it is a cultural shift in the way that people who provide services think of the relationship between what they do and the people who come through their door, regarding those people as assets, as people who have strengths, as people who have something to contribute to the way that services are provided. And this government is committed to that as a principle throughout everything that we do in the services for which we are responsible in Wales.
Question 5, John Griffiths.
Question 5, John Griffiths.
What strategy will the Welsh Government follow to build on the success of hosting major events in Wales?
Thank John Griffiths for that. We are committed to building on Wales's recent success in hosting major events. We work with partners in Wales, the UK and internationally to identify events with the potential to grow and to pursue new opportunities for attracting major sporting and cultural events to all parts of Wales.
First Minister, the Newport Marathon on the first Sunday of this month was an outstanding success, building on the achievements of the previous year. There were some 6,000 runners in the marathon, the 10K and the family fun run. Carnival atmosphere in Newport. The women's marathon was won by a Newport woman, which was very pleasing for all the locals. And, it really did encourage local people to think about running and getting more active. And it works with other regular events like the 2 park runs in Newport, which see several hundred people every Saturday morning getting more fit and active and enjoying a very healthy start to the weekend. So I'd be very pleased if you could recognise that success, First Minister, and also the importance in terms of profile of Wales and Newport, the spend it brings into Wales and Newport with hotels fully booked, restaurants, cafes and shops very busy. And also perhaps to look at how Welsh Government can continue to work with Newport City Council and key partners to build on the success of the first 2 Newport marathons for future years.
Well, thanks, John Griffiths, for that. He's absolutely right that the second Newport Wales Marathon was a terrific success, both in the numbers of people that it attracted to that mass participation event, but also in the way in which it was televised to other parts of the United Kingdom and beyond. The Welsh Government committed ourselves to investing in the Newport Wales Marathon last year, this year, and we will do so again next year. We want to help develop the event's ambition to become the national marathon for Wales. And of course, John Griffiths is right that beyond the event itself, such events add to the profile of the area. It's not the only major event that Newport is involved in a sporting sense. Glamorgan Cricket Club, Llywydd, are playing a county championship match in Sputty Park today for the first time in many decades. That's a major event in many of our diaries here. And of course, Newport County embarked on the latest of what has been such a fantastic run of success. We wish them well across this chamber earlier in the season. I'm sure we do that again this afternoon.
Rhina Piorwerth.
Thank you very much, Llywydd. I don't want people to feel that they're missing out, but there is one major sport that can only be held in my constituency, and I'm talking about the Island Games. And I'm very pleased to announce that this very second Ynys Môn County Council has agreed to underwrite those games for 2025. I'm extremely grateful to the Welsh Government for already agreeing to give a substantial sum of money. The charity trust in Anglesey has also provided a sum of money, as has the International Committee of the Island Games, and I'm very confident that through private sources and through local fundraising on Anglesey, we will ensure that we are able to stage very successful games in 2025, and I'm extremely grateful to the councillors for their support today. Does the First Minister agree with me that there is an opportunity through these games to leave a legacy for Anglesey in terms of physical activity and an interest in sport for decades to come?
Well, thank you to the member for drawing our attention to the fact that as the local council and ourselves as a government have supported the bid that has been submitted to attract the Games to Ynys Môn in 2025. The Games have developed and grown over the years, and now it's a major event in the annual calendar. And so we look forward to working with the local people to bring the Games to Ynys Môn and to use the Games, as Rhina Piorwerth said, to assist and support the economy on the island, to do things in the health area, and also to celebrate the fact that the Games have come to Ynys Môn in Wales.
Question 6, Jane Rathbone.
What does the Welsh Government have to develop a whole system approach to improving our food system?
Thank the member for that question. My colleague Lesley Griffiths will consult on a new action plan for food in the summer of this year. It will address the complexities of food products and consumption, with focus on the delivery of safe and healthy food choices, animal welfare and environmental recovery.
Well, I'm sure we'll all look forward to that consultation, First Minister, but I'm concerned that we have a fragmented system at the moment. We have the Health Minister who's awaiting the responses to the Healthy Weight, Healthy Wales consultation. We have the Education Minister in charge of school meals, a debate we're going to be having tomorrow. And we have the very welcome focus on food as part of the foundational economy. Yesterday, we've had lots of major food retailers stepping up to the plate in committing to halve food waste by 2030. This is, it seems to me, is a very complex subject. And I note that in Scotland, there's a lot of pressure to make the Good Food Nation bill one that delivers in a sustainable, holistic way. And I just wondered how the First Minister plans to bring all this together within the Welsh Government.
Well, thank the member for that. She's right to point to the complexity of it all. So it seems to me inevitable that almost every minister in the Welsh Government has an interest of one sort or another in food, and that it's not possible sensibly simply to concentrate all those quite different responsibilities, whether it be for school meals, for hospital food, for the food rating scheme, for food businesses, for the environmental impact of food, all in one ministerial portfolio. That means, in the way that Jenny Rathbone suggested, however, that we have to demonstrate that as a government we are actively organised to make sure that we draw all those different threads together in a coherent way. And I want to give the member an assurance that where there are specific initiatives, such as the Healthy Weight, Healthy Wales programme to which she referred, that while it was published by the Health Minister, it was thoroughly informed by officials across the Welsh Government and by discussion with other ministers. We have a standing coordinating group of senior officials in the Welsh Government to make sure that we bring the different activities that we undertake in the food field together. And the Food Action Plan, to which I referred in my original answer, has already been to Cabinet, has already been discussed, will be further refined now to make sure that it takes into account the views of ministers across the government, to make sure as best we can that we deliver what Jenny Rathbone asked for, which is a coherent approach across this complex area.
Question 7, David.
Question 7, David Rees.
Plans the Welsh Government have regarding expanding degree apprenticeships?
Llywydd, we are providing £20 million to pilot and test degree apprenticeships over the next 2 years. Following that, when we have that experience, consideration will be given to making the programme permanent.
I can thank the First Minister for that answer. Clearly, apprenticeships have been linked to education qualifications for many, many years, ONCs, HNCs, and now the degree apprenticeships are in fact a step forward and very much welcome. But I understand that in Wales we have 2 frameworks which are currently operational, and we have not yet expanded those 2 frameworks. I'm very pleased to hear you have pilots for 2 years, but when are you going to expand those 2 frameworks? Because we haven't got frameworks in health and social care, an area which we know there's a shortage of skills and gaps we need, and beyond that. So can you give us an indication as to when we'll go beyond the 2 frameworks we currently have?
Well, thank the member for that question. Of course, he is right and knows from his own direct previous experience that bringing the workplace and study together has very long been part of the way that we provide futures for people in Wales. The degree apprenticeship programme is a new initiative. Llywydd, 210 apprentices became the first to study in the new programme in September of last year, and another 210 or so will add to that programme in September of this year. That will test the 2 frameworks to which David Rees referred. We are looking actively, while that is happening, at other places where that could be expanded, and he's right to point to the field of social care as somewhere where we are always trying to raise the status of the profession through registration and through education and training. We will need to learn from the experience of these initial attempts. There's no point in starting something off in order to learn from it unless you're prepared to take the time that learning requires. But we are actively looking to find other ways in which we can build on what we feel confident will be the success of the programme.
Question 8, Michelle Brown.
Question 8, Michelle Brown.
Thank you. What assessment has the Welsh Government made of how effective the current funding models for public infrastructure projects are in attracting potential investors?
Thank the member. In funding infrastructure projects, my first aim is always to use the cheapest form of capital first, beginning, of course, with conventional capital spending. When all public sources are exhausted, we work with potential investors on key infrastructure projects, always ensuring that the public interest comes first.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister. But as we all know, there have been some very significant projects dropped recently, including Circuit for Wales, Wilf Nuclear Power Station and Tidal Lagoon. In each case, these failed because of issues with the funding model. For jobs and quality of life, Wales needs some major public infrastructure projects to actually get off the ground. Going forward, what other funding models are you looking at to attract investment in future projects?
Thank the member for that question. You can assure her that we will be working very closely with the UK Government on the new funding model that it is developing in relation to the potential future of Oilfa, and to see whether there is a model that they can devise that would attract investors back to the table, to see whether the pause in Oilfa can be unlocked there. As far as the Welsh Government is concerned, and of course the mutual investment model that we have developed has 3 key projects that we are taking forward. There's been a very strong interest from contractors and from funders. and we look still to developing that model in relation to the New Velindre, in relation to the 21st Century Schools programme and in roads projects as well.
Ac yn ola, cwestiwn 9.
Finally, question 9, Caroline Jones.
Will the First Minister outline the actions the Welsh Government is taking to improve the mental health of young people?
Clywed, the Welsh Government continues to take action across the range of our responsibilities, including working with schools, colleges and the NHS, as well as a range of other partners across the public and third sector, as we respond to the changing mental health needs of young people in Wales.
Thank you, First Minister. Young people today face an onslaught of pressures not even dreamt about during our generation. From pressures for how they look on Instagram to the need to spend money to avoid being a default in Fortnite. The burden of the social media age takes its toll. Last week, a survey revealed that 6- and 7-year-olds are worried about school tests. First Minister, what steps can your government take to reduce the stresses placed on young people?
Well, thank the member for that important question. I agree with her that the difficult business of growing up is in some ways even more difficult than it has been in the past because of the way in which new media and other things intrude into young people's lives and the pressures that young people can feel to succeed in what can feel like a difficult and competitive world. Where those things are in our hands, as in the case of 6- and 7-year-olds, then we have acted already to try and make sure that the formative work that is important, because it's very important that formative assessment is made of young people so that they can get the help they need, and that as their education progresses, it's tailored to their needs, but to try and bring about those formative assessments in ways that do not have the downsides of making those young people feel under additional pressures. And I know that Caroline Jones will know that we've moved to a new form of testing that will mean it doesn't all have to be bunched into a particular part of the year, that it will feel like conventional testing, and that individual young people will be able to pursue a series of questions that are right for them and allow their teachers then to make an assessment of their progress and to make sure that as they move ahead, they're able to get the sort of help that we would like to see for them.
Diolch i'r Prif Weinidog.
Thank you, First Minister.